Hey memers and streamers, this video is about chronic fatigue syndrome and long-haul COVID. I've mentioned my own health problems in passing during my prior videos, but I've never really been that open about the severity of these issues, how they affect my personal life, or how I deal with them. Now this was mostly just for personal privacy reasons, but with the sheer volume of cases that I'm hearing about people having long-haul COVID, and with how similar this sounds to CFS, I decided that it might be helpful to others to open up a bit about how this CFS-ME thing affects me, how I've learned to live with it, and how I think some of these approaches might help people with long-haul COVID. So I thought that maybe I would start with what the cause of CFS is, and then kind of go from there. Now unfortunately, as you can see here, pretty much anything that you read on the topic of CFS, they're going to be fairly open about the fact that nobody really knows what causes CFS. The only thing that we can really say for sure, or semi-sure, is that most patients seem to have a whole load of viral infections, serious viral infections, sometimes life-threatening, that eventually lead to the CFS symptoms. In my own personal situation, what happened was, back when I was still living the .com dream, I happened to have a period there where I was under a lot of stress personally, and I started getting a lot of infections. I got mononucleosis. I had a very serious case of dysentery where I very nearly died. I had another jaw infection from a dental problem that I had, which was another one that was really bad. I don't even remember the drive to the hospital for that one. It's just a big blank. But all of those all happened in a fairly short period of time, within a matter of a month or two. And it was actually the dysentery that seemed to push it over the edge. And when I say dysentery, I don't mean like my bowels were, ooh, my belly feels a little funny. I mean like I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and my first instinct was that my girlfriend was screaming because somebody had climbed in the window and was murdering her. Well, within a few seconds, I realized that it wasn't coming from her. The screaming was coming from me, and the pain is absolutely indescribable. It was an experience where it was so severe that when the cramps would happen just before you would black out, it's like it fractured your personality down the middle. Part of you dealt with the pain and the experience and the just sheer brutalness of it, while it's like another part of you was doing its best to keep you occupied thinking about something else, thinking about work projects, personal projects. And this is all occurring all at the same time. It was a very bizarre experience. And this dysentery was, my bowels bled, and I lost blood the kinds of which I didn't think a human being could lose and not die. And it was a matter of a couple of weeks before it finally slowed up to the point where I was able to get back to work. But within about a month after that experience, though, I thought I was actually almost back to normal, so to speak. But unfortunately, it wasn't long after that. Within another couple of weeks, it started to head south again, and it just headed south, and it has never come back since, and that's just about 20 years ago now. I apologize for having to sort of read from a script, but this is the kind of thing that CFS makes almost impossible to do in an impromptu manner. So anyway, for myself, there's two main types of effects that I get from the CFS. One is the physical effects, and the other is the mental effects. The physical effects are the sort of thing you would expect with the word fatigue in there. Severely limited energy levels. Now, when I say you're tired and run down, I don't mean like a normal person feels. There's a phrase that virtually everybody seems to parrot at some point or another when they hear the, descriptions of CFS, and it's usually the, well, I'm tired too thing. And honest to God, no. Just no. The fatigue from CFS is like a combination of severely low blood sugar just before the point where you pass out, and combined with a double dose of prescription sleeping pills. It's the kind of thing you can kind of get used to over time, but it makes everything extremely, extremely difficult. And it makes even the most basic stuff in life extremely fatiguing, because you're constantly having to be pushing mentally to get anything done. Some of the other issues that it causes are bowel issues, where sometimes my bowels will move twice as fast as they should. Sometimes they will stop altogether. Very, very occasionally they will do what they're supposed to do. But the one thing above all is that I can't eat more than my bowels are willing to process, so to speak. If I try and force this, it will almost always cause a crash, and crashes are not fun. Temperature regulation goes out the window, so you're perpetually either hot or cold, and it seems like your body can never make up its mind. Swollen glands are a problem. The glands in my neck tend to be swollen up enough that when most people see them, they ask me immediately what sort of cancer it is, and it's always the same thing. It's not a tumor. It's just swollen glands. Your muscles in general just feel very weak. Again, it feels like you have low blood sugar, where it takes exceptional effort to do anything that requires energy, I guess, for lack of a better way of explaining it. Basically, it just takes so much more effort to convince your muscles to do what you need them to do. Another very unhappy effect is the blood pressure problem, where every time you stand up, for a healthy person anyway, what happens is your body immediately sort of realizes what's happening, and before the blood runs out of your head and into the rest of your body, your lower extremities and all that other stuff sort of constricts a little bit, and it just holds the blood up in your head. That is a delayed thing in CFS. So when you first stand up, all that blood starts to rush to the bottom extremities, and then it just keeps going to the bottom extremities, and pretty soon you're like, oh, everything's kind of fuzzy and hazy, and I think I'm going to plunk. Now, most people that have had CFS for any length of time, they kind of know when this is going to happen, so they kind of prepare for it, and they either stand up slowly or do the double stand thing, where you stand up, wait for a second, sit down, stand up again, give it another try, and do that until it finally figures what it's doing. Then there's the mental effects that it causes. Your overall mental capacity is greatly lowered, because sleep deprivation is really what it feels like mentally. And so that means virtually everything important about your processing faculties just goes out the window. Your ability to form coherent thoughts is basically just gone. Your short-term memory and your working memory are much, much smaller than they used to be. For me, but by the time I'm trying to solve a problem, by the time I'm getting close to the solution, I've already forgot what the problem was. Your ability to learn new things and create new skills is also exceptionally interrupted. A good example of this is math is a hobby of mine, and there's a very trivial equation that kids learn when they're doing math in school. ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Basic quadratic equation. Kind of a trivial thing. It took me 12 months to remember that equation. And the only way I did it was by writing it down in anger over and over and over. I have literally filled entire notebooks with 100 or more examples on the page, over and over, 300-page notebooks, just ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Next line, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Next line, the entire book. That's what it took to memorize that. Before the CFS, that would have been a couple of minutes, look at it a few times, we're done. The working memory thing is something I mentioned as well. Working memory is part and parcel with what we often think of as IQ or intelligence. When you're problem solving, it requires you to remember multiple pieces of information at the same time and be able to manipulate them. So as an example, say you're adding two numbers. 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. Well, while you're doing that, you have to be able to keep at least two of those numbers in your head at any given time. So you're starting with the first number, 1, then you have the second digit, 2. Now you have an operator, which is addition. Now, what was the first part of that information we're working with? Do you see what I'm getting at? To be able to do that operation, you need to remember and be able to manipulate at least three things at the same time. The first number, the second number, and what your operator is. The better your ability to do that, and the more of those things that you can remember, the more intelligent we consider somebody to be, because it's the basics of information processing and problem solving. And so when I was working for a living writing software, I mean, software is one of the most difficult things that humans engage in. And it requires an exceptionally good memory. And once that memory was gone, I struggled. I tried to do my best, but there basically just wasn't anything I could really do to compensate for it once my memory was shot. Lastly, the brain fog thing is kind of a general description of what the experience feels like. It feels like that state where somebody just shook you out of a dead sleep, and you sort of know where you are. You know, if they ask you where you're at, you might be able to answer them, but you're there, but you're not really all there. And it's kind of like just perpetually going through life that way. Visually, you even see it's almost like colors are duller, shadows are kind of gray. It really does seem like almost a visible fog in some ways. Kind of a hazy, it's a very difficult to put into words experience. But the result of all of this is that it makes your daily life exceptionally challenging. So I figured what I'd do is give you an example of a real life thing that I do, which is once a year I visit family for Christmas, and this is the sort of stuff I have to do to prepare for that. So for our Christmas example, if we think about an average person, or even in my own life before I got the CFS, even a year before, I still remember just how different life was. So you might get off work at 4 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock if they let you out early on Christmas Eve. And my family would always get together on Christmas Eve, so on the 24th at night. And for us, basically, you could just get off work, go home, wash up a little bit, maybe, grab the stuff that you need and throw it in the vehicle and drive to the parents' place. And now you visit with your family for the whole night, and, you do your thing and have your fun, and everybody, gets to visit and talk and do their thing and do their present exchanges. And then everybody goes home and does their thing the next day, and everyone carries on. It is a much, much different experience now. Christmas is something that takes me a good chunk of the month of December to prepare for. In fact, I'm still partway through the process right now, and we're still only a couple of weeks from Christmas. But as an example for Christmas, things like washing clothes or getting other stuff ready that has to go, like presents and stuff, if I'm well enough to even get those. I haven't been able to for years now. But anyway, all of that kind of stuff needs to be done at least a month in advance. Any of the stuff that requires a lot of physical work, I have to do at least a month in advance so that I have time for my energy levels to kind of come back up enough that I'm not basically, just existing while I'm visiting my family. So I do all the clothes and stuff a month or so in advance. Cooking and all the other stuff that like, because a person needs to eat each day, and there's other stuff that you need to do each day. So what I'll often try and do is, a week or two in advance of Christmas, get all that stuff sorted out so that I'm not, having to cook big meals or anything in the few days or week leading up to Christmas. So I do as much preparation ahead of time as I can, so that basically for that week or so ahead of Christmas, all I'm really doing is eating, sleeping, and resting. Now, about 3 days prior to visiting, I got to make sure that I find a seat cushion, because I can't sit on hard surfaces at all these days. I did that once at Christmas here a few years ago, and for the next 3 days I couldn't sit. So I don't do that anymore. So I have to make sure I find a good cushion that I can sit on while I'm visiting. I have to find whatever medications, determine whatever medications I'm going to be taking, and have to be able to get through the night, which means pain medications, medications for the soreness and swelling for muscles, and all that kind of stuff. So that means lots of naproxen and stuff like that. Stimulant medications, so that you at least look like you got enough energy, so it looks like you're interested in being there. Get all that stuff sorted out and counted out. Figure out any other stuff I'm going to need. If the kids are going to be there, and our family is fairly large on that side. So, with a lot of kids, it can be pretty noisy at times. You get a half a dozen kids screaming and running around and yelling. So that means earplugs and stuff like that to just, try and deal with the sensory overload with that sort of a thing. And yeah, and then on Christmas Eve, I drive over and then try and spend the 3 or 4 hours with the family and enjoy the time with them. And the other thing I have to make sure that I do as well is make sure I don't have any prior engagements that I know that I need to do in a couple of weeks after Christmas, because, for a week to 2 weeks after Christmas, I am absolutely spent. Generally speaking, what I do during Christmas is I basically stay until my energy is done. And at that point, it's usually pretty sudden, and people are usually like, well, I hope you make it home okay. And, thankfully, I only live about, I don't know, half a kilometer or so from my family's home, so it doesn't take me long to get home. But yeah, so that's what Christmas is like. So now that we have a little bit of a picture of what CFS is like, how does it relate to other illnesses? Well, this is a subject that's been studied to some degree, and there's a chart that I thought I would share with you that kind of puts this in perspective, shall we say. What they did is they did a study where they figured the quality of life for various types of illnesses for various types of people, and then they charted the results. In the general population, you see here, which is this bottom line, the general population reports their general well-being or quality of life as the number that you see here. Now, what you'll notice is that as we go up the list, quality of life gets lower and lower. So for things like prostate cancer, sleep apnea, breast cancer, hernias, that sort of thing, you can tell that the quality of life is definitely lower than the general population without health issues. But if we keep going up, you'll notice that we're getting lower and lower and lower. And what we generally find is that really the worst quality of life is for people that have severe cases of chronic fatigue syndrome, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, as some people call it. And the reason is pretty obvious. It destroys your ability to function. And once you don't have the energy to physically do things, and you don't have the mental capacity to do things and interact with the world in a meaningful way, you essentially have no more quality of life. And the unfortunate part about this is that, generally speaking, most people consider something like CFS to be a trivial illness. So, nobody in their right mind would make fun of somebody that has, a brain stroke or lung cancer or something like that, or colon cancer or diabetes, we would consider that to be, an abhorrent type of thing to belittle somebody's illness. But yet, for some reason, when it comes to CFS, despite the fact that it absolutely derails people's lives, and I mean completely derails them, it's usually considered to be a trivial illness. And this is changing to some degree, but this is really the reason why I decided to do this video, because illnesses that have terms like chronic fatigue syndrome are the sorts of things where we belittle them naturally just because they don't sound serious. And I'm wondering if the same kind of a thing is going to be happening with the long haul COVID. And really, the long haul COVID, when I hear people describe it and I see the list of symptoms, it reminds me so much of CFS, to the point where I almost wonder if it may not eventually even be considered a type of CFS or a initial cause of a particular type of CFS, as in coronavirus infection leading to CFS. And part of my reasoning behind that is not just the fact that it's an illness that, acts and sounds like CFS, but it also has the viral component, the severe viral infection that leads to it. So it has the same sort of initial cause, or same type of cause, and a similar sounding effect on the person's quality of life. So if you or somebody you know sounds like you have CFS or long haul COVID, what are you to do? Well, there's some basic management strategies that I think are probably important for pretty much anybody, whether it's long haul COVID or really any kind of serious chronic long-term illness. The first thing you need to do is to find yourself a good general practitioner doctor. This is something you just have to do, and for multiple reasons. First, it may not be CFS, it may not be long haul COVID, and it might be something that they can treat, and if they can, this could save you a lot of grief in the long run. So get on it right away. Now, the one thing I should mention when it comes to doctors is that doctors are very much like auto mechanics. There's absolutely outstanding ones. There's ones that are so bad they probably shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and most fall somewhere in between there. Now, the reason I bring this up is one of the things that I've noticed in doctors is that a lot of them have a sort of an ego thing that they do, where they believe so strongly in themselves that when you first go to see them for a problem like this, they start making promises like they will absolutely cure you no matter what's wrong with you, and whatever kind of promise they happen to make. But the bottom line is this: it's often the case where they will eventually realize that basically they're just tilting at windmills, so to speak. And many of them, when they realize that you're not getting better, or in some cases getting worse, will just simply drop you like a hot potato. And I've had multiple doctors do this to me. Usually the ones that tended to brag about themselves, unfortunately. But yeah, my advice would be to find a good doctor who, even if he's not able to, make whatever problem you have disappear outright, that he's at least willing to stick with you and help you with symptom management, and keeping a written medical log of your illness over time. This could be very, very important in the future for things like benefits or insurance. So yeah, definitely find yourself a good doctor. Now, if it turns out that you really do have CFS or long haul COVID, there's some basic management strategies that are helpful here too. Pay attention to what your body is telling you. This is something that we generally don't do in life. We just kind of tend to be, at least for myself anyway, I'm very focused on what I'm doing, and everything else is secondary. I'm very task-oriented, task-driven, which with something like CFS is a very, very bad habit, because CFS can be a very insidious disease. And again, because of the similarities between CFS and long haul COVID, the same thing probably applies to long haul COVID as well. So it's important to pay attention, because things can, start off pretty subtle. Things like, your stomach being upset a little bit, that can usually be the sign of something, bad coming, like a crash or something like this. So paying attention is very helpful. Keeping a written journal can also be helpful. Make sure you log the date and time of the things that you put in there. You should be logging things like what time you went to bed, when you got up. You should be giving an overall summary of how you feel when you get up and when you go to bed. You should be writing down what you're eating, when you've eaten it, how much you've eaten. You should be giving a kind of a play-by-play of your symptoms over time. So as they change, write them down. As you do this, you're going to learn things about the illness, like where your new limits are. And it's important to try and stay within those limits, because CFS is one of those things where the easiest way to basically put yourself flat on your back is to try and exceed that energy envelope that you have. If you're only able to say, cook dinner and wash clothes in a particular day, and that's all you can do before you start buggering yourself up, then don't do more. Because if you do, you're just going to bug yourself up, and now you're sick or sicker, and you're not doing the things that you were originally supposed to be doing. So it's important to try and pay attention and stay within that energy envelope that you have. Now, mental dealing with this sort of thing can be, boy, that's a bad way of putting it. What's a better way of putting it? Dealing with loss, I guess, is really what you're doing here. So you need to accept that your life is different now. It may not always be this way. You may actually end up getting better. And some people with CFS do get better, but some people don't. Some people like myself, I've had CFS now for almost 20 years, and it's not gotten better. It's actually gotten worse over time. So understanding that my life has changed has allowed me to stop doing that tilting at windmills thing and trying to push, towards my old goals that I had for my life, and create new goals that are achievable with the state of health that I have now, and push towards those. So understanding that things are different can help you sort of plan for the future, plan to get what you want to get out of life. You need to understand that even though your life is very different now, your life is not over. This is very, very important. It's important for you. It's important for the people around you. Things are different, but life isn't over. Another thing I think is important to try and find something constructive to do with your time that you do have that you find rewarding in some way. That's what I've done with this YouTube channel. When I got really serious about the PvP gaming thing, it was a brutal experience, because, let's be honest, when you're 50 years old and your health is bad enough that you're housebound, and you're barely able to hobble to your chair in the front room from your bed, playing against young teenagers is not an easy thing. So, when I realized that I had put in so much work and actually built skill that was, turned out to kind of be an amazing story, I decided to start this YouTube channel specifically to share that story and those tools with other people, to help other people that might be in a similar situation. It has been incredibly rewarding for me, and I'm grateful that I have the outlet to do that. But I think it's important for anyone, no matter what it is that you do, but find something that's important to you that you're still able to do, and something that gives you meaning, and just start doing it. Just start doing it, man. Lastly, I think it's important to be helpful that, it's helpful to be thankful that we're still here. It can be kind of a bummer at times when you experience, serious loss of quality of life with something like CFS or any serious illness, but there's still good things to be had in life, no matter, as long as you're still here, like they say, it's not over till the fat lady sings. And yeah, as long as you're still here, there's still something to be thankful for. Anyhow, guys, that's about all I can think of for now. Yeah, if you or anyone you know is dealing with CFS or long haul COVID or any serious illness like that, my heart goes out to you, and I wish you the best. Anyhow, yeah, if you have any comments or anything that you want to say, leave a comment down in the comments below, and we will catch you later.